With our next storyteller, who, again, I love the answer to these questions of what would you miss if you were to move away from New York. And she said, all the flowers at the bodegas. That was one of the first things I noticed when I moved here. How beautiful that is, and how you just get to walk down the street, and all the time you're just surrounded by these amazing flowers of all colors and sorts. Great answer. And here's a great storyteller. Please welcome Kara Pranikoff, everybody.
I'm an elementary school teacher, and I work at a public school downtown in Tribeca. It's the same public school where I worked 10 years ago, when on the morning of September 11th, I took the hands of some of my third grade students and evacuated my school building and started walking up north as the second tower of the World Trade Center collapsed and covered us with some gray dust. Like all New Yorkers in the aftermath of 9/11, we were trying to figure things out. What was most prevalent for my school is we were trying to figure out where we were going to be, because everyone downtown had been displaced. By the end of October, the Board of Ed had taken on a parochial school in Chelsea, and we finally had a home again. I can't begin to tell you how miraculous it was to walk into a classroom that was going to be our own again. There were beautiful wooden floors and nice tall ceilings, big glass, gorgeous windows where sunlight poured in. And there was also a cloakroom. The morning that my children came back into this classroom, or came to the classroom for the first time, was unbelievably joyous. We sat on our rug together and we talked about how good it was to be back together in our own space, and we imagined how we were going to make this classroom come alive. We also established the rules of the cloakroom. They went like this. You go in the cloakroom in the morning, you hang up your backpack and your coat, and you come out. You go in the afternoon, you pick up your backpack, you pick up your coat, and you come out. Because if you're in that cloakroom, behind that wall and door, I can't see you. And more important than anything else, I need to know that you're safe. So I need to be able to see you. We got down to business, and a little later that morning, a couple of boys came over to me. They were having some friendship issues. They asked if they could go into the cloakroom to work it out. Now, you need to understand that in our old class, room 316 downtown, this question would have been a no-brainer. I would have said, good for you for knowing that you needed to work something out and using your words. I would have commended them. I would have reminded them to use polite tones of voice, and would have reminded them that, of course, in a community, there are going to be times when we need to work out our friendship. And then I would have invited them to step outside my classroom into the hallway and take their time making things better. But now they wanted to go into the cloakroom. I turned around, I looked at the wall, I looked at the door, I looked back at them and I said no. And they asked why. And I said, okay, you have about 5 minutes. Go in and work it out. Every 10 seconds or so, I would peek my head in to make sure they hadn't disappeared. They sat on the floor and talked things through. And sure enough, after not too much time had passed, they came out friends again. They hadn't disappeared. A few days later, my whole class was in the middle of an enormous art project. Most of us were finished, but one group needed some more time. And they came over to me and asked if they could go into the cloakroom. I paused, and they walked into the cloakroom with piles of paint and the paintbrushes and papers, and I stuck my head in the door every few minutes, and they didn't disappear. But they did come out with an unbelievable painting that covered a wall in our classroom for the entirety of the year. Then there was a day when my whole class walked up the stairs. We were coming back from lunch, and the kids went into the classroom before I did, and when I crossed the threshold, they were nowhere to be found. But I heard some laughter behind the cloakroom door, and then suddenly it opened, and out they tumbled, yelling, "Surprise!" There they were. And then there were days like the day when morning work started, and I noticed that a little girl looked awfully sad. So I bent down next to her and got at eye level and asked if she wanted to talk. And she took my hand, and we went into the cloakroom together. And she told me how sad she was feeling because she was still displaced from her home and living in a hotel with her family. And so many of the students in our classroom were back in their rightful homes, and she was awfully happy for them, but so sad for herself. By the end of February, we were able to get back into our school, and we moved back downtown, back into room 316. And again, it was unbelievably joyous. The kids came in, and we talked about what looked familiar, and we talked about how good it felt to be back home, and we sat around the rug. And a little boy raised his hand and said, "You know, it's kind of like we had summer because we haven't been here in so long, except that we've all been together." And I realized in that moment how happy and lucky we were to be back in our public school, and that the private space that we had created together would not disappear.
Teacher at PS 234 in Tribeca, and those kids are lucky to have you. That's all I have to say.